Madam President of the Assembly, distinguished delegates, members of the international community, my name is Captain Ibrahim Traore, head of state of Burkina Faso. I represent a people too often spoken for, but rarely listened to. I did not come here to extend pleasantries. I came to correct a record soaked in silence. I speak today not just as a president, but as a son of Africa's wounded soil, where minerals are exported but voices are buried. You may have seen the name of my country on your briefings, your forecasts, your aid packages. But today you will hear our truth without translation. They silenced the drums in our villages and called it peacekeeping. But peace without truth is the most violent lie of all. I am not a diplomat. I did not come from their white tiled halls or their donor dinners. I am a barefoot witness, raised in dust, fed by resistance, and sharpened in the shadow of betrayal. Today I speak not from Ouagadougou's hotels, but from the edge of a broken borehole, where the children drink silence and the elders whisper warnings. The United Nations, yes them, whose blue helmets parade as hope, now smother voices that rise from the soil. They call it order, stability, and international consensus. But we know their words. Aid is control, peace is surveillance, and development is a cage built with contracts signed in languages we do not speak. The bones of our ancestors rattle when their resolutions pass. For every dollar pledged, a drum goes mute. For every report published, a memory is erased. For every blue flag raised, a black voice is buried beneath bureaucracy. And still, we remember. We remember the ghost missions, the cursed missions, the missions that arrived with cameras and left with our minerals. We remember the blood beneath the briefings, the betrayal behind the badges, the reckoning that now knocks on every radio dial. Let them block this message if they dare. But we will speak it still, across borders and bandwidths, across villages and cities, until the lie can no longer hold. They said silence was peace. But we have lived under silence that suffocates, silence that walks in UN boots, silence that drops like contracts from Geneva, silence that bleeds like invisible war. I speak now not as a president in polished cloth, not as a groomed puppet in a padded seat, but as a son of miners, of mothers who stitched hope into Kent cloth, of elders whose bones lie under baobab trees that have seen too much. I speak from a land where the UN came with papers and cameras, but left with our names twisted, our tongues mistranslated, our truth redacted. They call it peacekeeping, but whose peace? They say development, but whose design? They whisper stability, but for whose regime? Let me name it clearly. The UN is not neutral. It is an empire in a blue disguise. It polices the tongues of rebels, edits the speeches of prophets, and files away the fury of the poor. They do not fear bullets. They fear voices. They fear us on this mic. They came to our villages with clipboards and condescension, mapping hunger like it was a statistic, not a system they designed. They hosted development summits in 5-star hotels while women gave birth beside oil pipelines and drank cholera through copper pipes. Their NGOs danced through our crises like missionaries with newer names. And always, they brought with them that cursed paperwork. Aid reports, compliance audits, memoranda of understanding that understood nothing. We are told the UN is here to help. But in the name of help, they have built data prisons and fiscal cages. They teach us to chase aid like it's oxygen, yet call it growth. When we breathe without their loans, they offer capacity building, like we have no memory, no knowledge, no history of our own. They arrive with drones and white jeeps, but it is our elders who navigate the storms, our midwives who birth life in darkness, our farmers who feed nations without being fed by them. The betrayal is spiritual. The betrayal is colonial in code, but global in costume. It is not a bullet. It is a blueprint. Not a coup. It is a conference. Not a war. It is a whisper in a UN corridor that says, censor that man. That speech is too angry. That woman must not speak of sovereignty. But we are done asking. We are done being silent to soothe their ears. Because every time we held our tongues to keep peace, our people were buried in silence. And now, even the land is speaking. The rivers spit out bones. The skies thunder names they tried to erase. The UN once wrote a report about this village. They titled it, Post-Conflict Recovery. But no one here had ever stopped fighting. They just changed the battlefield from machines to meetings, from coups to clauses. They put a solar lamp in the school, then removed the teacher. They built a borehole, then sold the water rights. They sent us training on resilience, while their consultants dined in air-conditioned justice. We are not ungrateful. We are awake. We are not anti-peace. We are anti-imposter. We are not rejecting help. We are rejecting hierarchy. And I tell you this, they can block this frequency, but the frequency is already in the blood. In Brooklyn barbershops, in Toronto basements, in Brixton soul kitchens. This truth is already cooking. So hear this well, you who sit in blue chairs, Africa is not yours to manage. Our minds are not yours to moderate. Our future is not yours to forecast. And our voices will thunder until the silence breaks. They gave us loans carved like handcuffs, shiny on the outside, choking within. And now they tell us we are drowning in debt, but it was their tide that dragged us under. Debt, they say, is our disease, but the real sickness is the structure. A design where Niger's uranium lights up Paris, while the children of Arlet do homework in the dark. I am speaking from beneath the dust of cancelled futures, where the price of water is determined by a spreadsheet in Washington, and the value of life is negotiated in the decimal points of IMF reform packages. We do not owe the world. We have already paid with cocoa, cobalt, and corpses. The IMF arrives like a surgeon with no soul. Scalpel in hand, they promise fiscal discipline. They cut education to balance budgets. They bleed hospitals to satisfy creditors. They privatize water, electricity, even breath, and call it structural adjustment. But to us, it is structural suffocation. They preach stability but sow starvation. They speak of reform, but enforce ruin. They call it partnership, but we only see puppetry. For every technical advisor they send, 1,000 local thinkers are silenced. For every grant they offer, a generation is mortgaged. Tell me, what kind of aid comes with interest? What kind of help charges you rent on your own resources? They say, Africa is rising, but it rises like smoke from a village burning under austerity. They say, investment is flowing, but it flows like a river diverted from our mouths into their offshore banks. We were born into contracts our grandfathers never signed. We were born into credit histories, where the only history is colonization. They colonized our minerals, now they colonize our margins. Their central banks act as our colonial governors. Their credit agencies rank our dignity like livestock. Our copper wires feed their tech. Our lithium powers their green future. Yet we die without light, without signal, without bandwidth. We bleed in clinics with no gauze, while the consultants write prescriptions priced in consultancy fees. They tell us to digitize, but only through their platforms. They teach us blockchain, but only through their tokens. They urge us to leapfrog, but keep the leap tethered to their IP. They want us to trade their dollars in dust, while they encrypt their wealth in blockchain vaults, hidden from tax and truth. This is not debt. It is digital bondage. They say we must modernize, but they keep the servers. They say we must compete, but they own the code. This is not globalization. It is algorithmic apartheid. But hear me now. Our poverty is not natural. It was manufactured, engineered, branded with jargon like emerging markets, low-income nations, and fiscal thresholds. Yet none of their metrics can measure the silence of a school that closed when interest payments rose. Our ancestors bartered with fairness. Gold for salt, yams for cloth. Today, we exchange futures for euros, autonomy for audits, sovereignty for signatures. And when we ask for dignity, they send more consultants. But listen, and listen well, we are not the indebted. We are the defrauded. We are not underdeveloped, we are overexploited. We are not fragile, we are force held back by foreign policy. From the coder in Kigali who builds with no funding, to the trader in Kampala taxed without infrastructure. We see the game now. We see the empire dressed as accounting. We see the chains made from spreadsheets and sealed with press releases. Let this be known in every corner where Africa's children raid by candlelight while oil barrels leave at sunrise. We do not owe. We are owed. And no interest rate can calculate what they took. We will balance the books. Not in their ledgers, but in the memory of every mine, every mother, every mother. And when we rise with compound rage. They say the world runs on rules. But whose rules, and whose world? Because from where I stand, in a village erased from Google Maps, it feels like the script was written long before we were born. A global play performed in our names, but never for our benefit. A system where the stage is polished in Geneva, but the backstage reeks of sabotage. The G7 smiles like saviors while they launder our futures in offshores. The Bretton Woods twins, the IMF and World Bank, speak of reform, yet we are trapped in reruns of colonialism with new curtains. The WTO preaches free trade, but our shelves are filled with imports, and our factories rot and rust. This isn't trade, it's trafficking. Trafficking of data, dignity, and decisions. Do you see it now? The rating agencies downgrade us for building clinics, but praise dictators who privatize them. They measure us by creditworthiness, but ignore the unpaid debts of empire. Where is our rating for surviving enslavement, for enduring occupation, for still giving cocoa while our children sip powdered milk? Africa is not poor. Africa has been priced low by men who never stepped in our sun, priced by extractive models, colonial contracts, and surveillance disguised as security. You think Africom is here to help? No. Africom watches with drones while mercenaries move beneath their radar. They monitor terrorism, but ignore the terrorism of hunger. They say coups are African problems. But who funded the generals? Who trained them in foreign academies? Who flew in under the night with pallets of dollars and promises of power? The CIA knows. France knows. They play chess while we bury kings. And Gaddafi, yes, Gaddafi, he dared to write a new script, a gold-backed dinar, a sovereign monetary path. For that they struck him down, and they called it liberation. But we know it was liquidation. They fear a united Africa. Not for our weapons, but for our wisdom. They fear a continent that remembers itself. They fear a people who no longer measure their worth in dollars or diplomas. They fear the village over the boardroom, the griot over the algorithm, the memory over the model. We export diamonds and import toothpicks. Our hands dig treasure, but our shelves stay bare. We plant cocoa that feeds Europe's sweet tooth, but our children know the taste of hunger. We build roads for foreign trucks, not for local progress. And in the legal arena, the insult deepens. They write laws in Geneva that govern our wombs in Accra. Ghost signatures shaping futures without a fingerprint from our people. They call it intellectual property, but it is memory theft. They license our seeds, patent our herbs, and criminalize our wisdom if it doesn't wear a lab coat. We are told to follow international norms. But when we ask who wrote them, silence follows. When we ask who ratified them, shadows gather. When we ask whose benefit they serve, 1,000 NGOs start talking, but none answer. The script is broken. No, worse. It was built broken. It was designed to keep us applauding while others feast behind the curtain. Designed so that even when we rise, we are rising through systems they own. Platforms, ratings, currencies, laws. But let them know we are not rewriting their script. We are burning it. We will speak not in their think tanks, but in town squares. Not in English alone, but in Wolof, Swahili, Hausa, and silence that stings. They created global systems where Africa was the footnote. But now we write in ink that does not dry, and in tongues they cannot mute. We are not just participants in the global economy. We are the stolen authors reclaiming the pen. Enough of protest that ends in pleading. Enough of resolutions passed in foreign tongues. We are done waiting for the world to approve our freedom. This is the age of the rebirth mandate. Not begged for, not borrowed, not negotiated, declared, built, carried by calloused hands and unsilenced tongues. We will not heal through conferences. We will heal through construction of truth, of systems, of economies that speak our dialects and walk in our footprints. Let the UN host its donor galas. We will host planning seasons. Let the IMF project its graphs. We will project the grain yields from sovereign soil. This is not a dream. It is blueprint forged in fire. We will build factories with our hands, not wait for handouts priced in interest. We will lay fiber cables between villages, connect Ouagadougou to Johannesburg without passing through Paris. We will print books in our languages. We will digitize history on our servers. We will mint our own value, not just in currency, but in code. They told us we must import technology, but tech is not magic. It is memory turned mathematical, and our memories are rich. Our languages are algorithms. Our patterns are logic gates. They sell us paper maps while they move through the world in data and code, owning nations with algorithms, not armies. But now we speak the language of networks, Not to serve Silicon Valley, but to liberate Karamoja, Lagos, and Bobodia Lasso from digital dependence. No more importing sovereignty. We will engineer it from ground up. With fintech platforms that answer to no foreign regulator. With mobile banks that do not require colonial trust. With land registries that protect elders from corporate eviction. Yes, our revolution will be digital, but rooted. Crypto that remembers the cowries. Satellites that respect ancestral borders. Decentralized identity that carries the weight of clan, spirit, and struggle. No more waiting to be included in systems that were designed to exclude us. We will code our own doors. We will build our own keys. They fear this version of us. Not because we are angry, but because we are organized. Not because we protest, but because we produce. And we will produce with purposey food that feeds sovereignty, apps that trade dignity, tools that teach in mother tongue. Our education systems will no longer be groomed to serve the World Bank. They will raise inventors, not just clerks. Midwives of knowledge, not just consumers of theory. We will teach our children economics that begins with land, not interest rates. Medicine that respects the drumbeat and the microscope. And for energy, no more blackout while our resources light up Europe. We will wire our homes with the sun. We will power our hospitals with rivers they tried to dam. We will build microgrids that serve community, not just capital. We have no use for sustainable development goals that sustain dependence. We want irreversible emancipation, a currency backed not just by reserves but by respect, a passport that opens doors not just abroad, but at home, a database that cannot be sold to foreign bidders. This is not a policy vision. This is ancestral revenge in digital form, a return to the circle, the village, the cooperative, where no one eats alone, and no one starves in the shadow of a bank. Africa will be built, not by billionaires with branding decks, but by seamstresses coding inventory apps, by farmers sensing with the rains through solar sensors, by herbalists uploading cures in blockchain archives. This is the new Ubuntu connected, conscious, and sovereign. The rebirth has no anthem, only action, no logo, only land, no donors, only doors, and we have already begun. The real revolution does not begin in the palace. It begins in the kitchen, the workshop, the cocoa farm where wages still bleed. It begins with women who barter under trees, with boys who fix radios from scrap, with seamstresses who stitch resilience into every hem. This is the rise of the people, uncertified, unstoppable, and uncompromising. Do not look to the summit for leaders. Look to the seed planters. Look to the mechanic in Ibadan and the coder in Kigali. They are not just repairing machines, they are repairing memory. They are not just building apps, they are building answers. We have trusted the suits too long. Those trained abroad to speak in development dialects, who forget their grandmother's names but remember policy jargon. But real leadership is barefoot, rooted, unpolished. It lives in midwives who keep generations breathing without a budget. It flows through fishermen who map tides better than any satellite. It whispers from griots who carry memory without megabytes. They thought dignity was something to deliver from Geneva. But our people have worn it like skin, even when their homes crumbled. Even when foreign aid came with cameras. Even when consultants made notes while mothers wept in maternity wards with no light. They taught us to envy their titles, but we now honor our own. Elder, mama, yaya, nana, oga, comrade. They taught us to aspire to whiteness in thought, in grammar, in gatekeeping. But we now walk with the rhythm of ancestors, writing code with the cadence of our drums. Dignity is not theory. It is labor unexploited. It is a hand that tills land without being taxed by strangers. It is a market woman whose stall was never mapped by Google, but feeds more people than the entire aid industry combined. It is a bricklayer who builds schools where ministers send their children abroad. And now they rise. Farmers who form co-ops without permission, youth who invent currencies without central banks, healers who cure with both leaves and laptops. This is not informal. This is ancestral infrastructure. They tried to make us feel small because we do not own skyscrapers. But our dignity is not measured in glass and steel. It is measured in land passed down without title, in stories told without paper, in borders crossed without passports, because blood knows no frontier. We reclaim not just property, but prophecy. Our lands are sacred, but our deeds are missing. A village uprooted by a contract no elder ever signed. But now we rewrite those contracts in community courts, where judgment is passed by the people, not by international arbitration panels in London. They said property is value, but we say land is memory. They said innovation comes from venture capital. We say it comes from necessity, fire, and resistance. And we rise now with tools, not slogans. Microgrids in Masaka, rainwater harvesters in Togo, 3D printed prosthetics in Nairobi, digital ID systems in Accra that answer to the people, not the UN. This is not modernization. It is remembering forward, reclaiming the wisdom of the elders and mixing it with the fire of the youth. Not to compete with the West, but to be complete in ourselves. Africa's strength is not in its minerals, it is in its multitudes. A people so persistent, they turned every sanction into a strategy. So creative, they made computers out of scarcity. So unified, they whisper across the ocean to brothers in Baltimore, to sisters in Brixton, to children in Cape Town and Comptown. We are not poor. We are potent. We are not dependent. We are deliberate. And our dignity will never again be outsourced. It is written, not in treaties, but in time, not in resolutions, but in rain patterns, in soil, in silence that grows too loud to bury. This is the reckoning, and we do not ask for it politely. We deliver it with the clarity of thunder and the confidence of ancestors watching through baobab bark. Let the UN call emergency meetings. Let the IMF draft urgent reviews. Let NATO reposition satellites. The age of Africa asking is dead. The age of restoration without permission has begun. You do not get to rob for 500 years, then demand civility when we reclaim. You do not get to write history, hoard memory, then panic when we remember. They said we are rising. No, we are returning. To the place before the theft. To the mind before the mission school. To the rhythm before the rule book. Let the spreadsheets tremble. Let the think tanks stutter. We have come for what is ours, and we will not knock. We will expropriate what was extracted. We will repossess what was repackaged. We will decolonize not just the flag, but the fiber optic cables, the monetary systems, the diplomatic dialect. Let the IMF keep their forecasts. We have our futures written in the stars, not spreadsheets. Their models fail to predict our fire. Their metrics cannot measure our rage. They counted GDP, but never counted grandmothers who raised villages. They measured growth, but not grief. They tracked inflation, but not injustice. Now hear this, and hear it well. Africa is the creditor. Yes, the creditor of stolen centuries. Where are the interest payments on rubber, on cotton, on gold that lined the teeth of monarchs while our people slept without beds? You want numbers. Let's count the bodies in the Atlantic. Let's count the languages erased. Let's count the patents stolen, the cures claimed, the seeds patented. Let's count the trauma passed down in wombs. And then let us build the world properly. Our restoration is not reparations alone. It is reparation, and reparation by reclamation. We will take what is due, in land, in bandwidth, in sovereignty. Africa will no longer beg for health care. It will build it with sovereign data, sovereign budgets, sovereign hands. We will not be the testing ground for failed pharmaceuticals. We will not be the export zone for rejected vaccines. We will heal by knowing ourselves. And we will code that knowledge into systems they cannot breach. We do not need permission to reclaim our ports, our skies, our water. We do not need approval to nationalize the oil, the cocoa, the lithium. We will write policies in proverbs. We will issue passports in languages they refuse to learn. We will define security on our terms, not through surveillance, but through self-determination. Let the UN stamp its disapproval. Let USAID withhold its grants. Let every empire clutch its pearls. This time we are not afraid. We are not confused. We are not divided. Because the voice they feared has multiplied. It echoes from Lagos to London, from Soweto to Seattle. It leaks through every firewall. It floods every forum they tried to control. The reckoning is not a day, it is a wave. And it is already breaking. Across timelines and trade routes. Across borders and bandwidths. Across history and horizon. This is not a revolution waiting to happen. It is one that has already arrived, with sheets of memory, laptops of justice, and drums that beat with the certainty of sovereign return. We are the storm they dismissed as weather. We are the correction they buried in footnotes. We are the people who will not ask again. Restoration is not a request. It is a right, and we take it now, without permission.